Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Boston Architectural Hinge Company, their BB0179 NRP in a 4.5 by 4.5. Boston Architectural Hinge was an importer of hardware from overseas, hinges and door closers, some other stuff. But hinges is kind of what I worked with them on mostly. I say was because they did cease operations, I think, in early 2019, and I'm basically making this video for archival purposes. I want to, just have for posterity, I suppose, what this hinge was. So this is, 179 BB. You get the idea of that part number, or partially, is probably familiar to you if you're familiar with full mortise hinges. This is a ball bearing hinge, and that means that there are two bearing packets, and that's because this is a standard weight hinge. That leaf feels a little thin for some reason. I'm going to put the caliper on it. It does actually feel thin. Not that I could tell, but my caliper is telling me 0.127. So it's, I would never know that. It just felt like it was thin. So it's a little bit shy of 134 of what it should be, 134 thousandths. This is a ball bearing hinge. The 0179 means that it's made of steel. They did finish the back of the hinge, apparently. Not every hinge manufacturer does that. That it's full mortise. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here and here that the leaves are meant to be mortised to the edge of the door and frame when they're brought parallel. A 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch means that it's 4.5 inch tall. It's important to know the height is the first dimension and that the width is the second dimension. Doesn't really matter as much on a square hinge, but it sure would if you're dealing with a 5 by 4.5 or a 4.5 by 4 or a 5 by 8. You want to know what is the reference point, and the height is the first dimension on hinges like this. This is also a non-removable pin. There's a set screw that's been drilled and tapped into this barrel, and in the pin itself there's a groove that's cut around the perimeter of that pin so that when you tighten the set screw up, it'll seat inside of that groove, and then it all but prevents you from driving the pin out. A very effective way at keeping a door, an exterior door that swings out, secure by not being able to drive that pin out. You can take the pin out, you just need to loosen or all but remove that set screw. You don't have to remove it, but you have to get it out of the way of the outer diameter of the pin. Satin chrome, that's the 26D part. By the time you're seeing this video, we may have none of these left in stock, but at least the video will live on. Let's switch to the screen view and take a look at the template really quick, because this discussion does apply to standard full mortise hinges as well. Okay, so here's the item that we're looking at, and the extended description is here. 4.5 non-removable pin. It is a full mortise hinge that's ball bearing, standard weight, which means 134 thousandths. Our actual sample measured out a little bit thinner than that. And here's that link to the template. And what that's going to show you will be the location of all of the holes for the screws. So if you're not sure if you are matching existing, well, here's a drawing that will show you where all of these holes are. Top down, or whichever, from the edge of the leaf over to the center line as well. Handy document to be able to review that. This dimension is called the swag line. It's the length of the leaf from the edge of the leaf to where the bend starts. And that there should be a dimension here for that. And there's not. Yeah, not that I can see. But that's what that dimension would refer to. And, I can just kind of tell you with my tape measure what that would be. It's going to be about 1 7/8 inches. Right in that range, about 1 7/8 inches. Obviously the dimension from here to the center line is half of your width, so that's 2 1/4. And this is, I'm saying, about 1 7/8 inside of here. Okay, so not a lot to see here, but the reason that that dimension is not there is because this template applies to a 4 1/2, 4 1/2, and then a 4 1/2 by 4, and you could definitely count on that swag line being 1/8 of an inch smaller in that regard, because it's a 1/4 inch smaller, not 1/8, a 1/4 inch smaller, because it's folded in half is why. Okay, let's see. Not much else to talk about this. Let's switch back to the camera view and finish up this video. And this hinge includes a package of screws, all machine screw, all wood screws. So, you know, if you're seeing this video, these guys are out of business, and by the time you're watching this, we probably won't have any left in stock. However, it's a very generic hinge. It's 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. It is full mortise. It's made of steel. It's ball bearing, and it has a non-removable pin feature to it. So having said that, there's lots of different vendors, either importers or domestic manufacturers, who we can supply you these hinges to help you get back in business. This is an incredibly common hinge, and that it's 4 1/2 inch tall. So hollow metal doors and frames, that's going to be the standard size. Not that it's the correct size, but it will certainly be the most common size. And if I was going to say something was standard, it would be 4 1/2. The width, though, is sometimes this 4 1/2 inch width. And I've been told by someone who is head of specifications for an absolute major manufacturer of hinges in the United States. If I said their name, you would absolutely know them. Basically, I've heard him say, speaking to distributors, listen, we only give you the 4 1/2 inch wide because that's what you ask for. And what his point was is that doesn't mean it's the right size. So in lots of instances, it works in most instances, but is it the best hinge? And in lots of cases, it's not. What I mean to say is, if you have a drywall hollow metal frame and it's wrapping over a partition, 4 1/2 inch is too wide. You should be using a 4 inch hinge. That would be considered best practice. If you have if you have 8 inch cement, if you have 8 inch block and you're taking a 5 3/4 frame and centering it in that wall, 4 1/2 inch will probably work and get you to 180 degree. But the point is you need to lay that math out, because 4 1/2 is the Swiss Army knife of hinge widths. Doesn't mean it's the best choice. So what you do to determine that is there's a formula, and that formula is basically take the door thickness and subtract the back set. And in many cases, that's a 1/4 inch. You multiply that by 2. So if you're following along, 1 3/4 minus 1/4 inch is 1 1/2 times 2 is 3 inch. Add to that the clearance, which would be the distance from the face of whatever is on the frame and the inside face of the door if the door is at 180 degrees. How much room between the wall and the face of the door do you need to clear? Add that dimension. Then add the inset, which would be the dimension that the door sits into the frame itself. If you ran your hand over the face of the jamb and the door on the pull side, it's probably, although it could be, it's probably not flush. It's probably moved in ever so slightly, but it could also be moved in 1 inch or several inches. So you add the inset as well. So door thickness minus back set times 2 plus clearance plus inset. That then go to the next widest hinge, and that's your hinge. And if you run that formula on everything you do, you'll find that you don't buy as many 4 1/2 inch wide hinges as you used to. You want to keep the center line, the vertical axis of pivoting on the hinge, as close to the center of the thickness as you can. And when you bring that 4 1/2 inch hinge into a 4 inch wide hinge, you bring it back a 1/4 inch. Doesn't seem like a lot, but there's the way that it's done, and then there's the best practice way. And best practice would call out, in lots of instances, a 4 inch wide hinge. So, you know, I've just taken to, you know, not just a, you know, I've taken to supplying the proper hinge according to the specifications and plans when I have those available to me, rather than just 4 1/2, 4 1/2s. Well, is that correct? Maybe, maybe not. You know, I had a client who was doing a daycare, you know, like little kids, like toddlers, like pre-K daycare, and they needed to be able to take their door and had to get it 180 degree and then secure it in the open position because the kids are going in and out, mechanically hold it open. So yeah, we had to basically determine what is the distance from the face brick to where the frame is, and then add the inset there. So the face brick, the fact that the frame was set in, that became my clearance dimension plus my inset. And it did require a wide throw hinge. It was no big deal. It required a hinge that was like 5 3/8. So the only size we could get was 6. So we went with 4.5 by 6. Also be mindful that the height is not necessarily always the right height at 4.5 inch. If you have up to 3-foot doors or maybe up to 3'6", and they're typical 18 gauge hollow metal, I think 4.5 is a good choice. You get 3'6" and beyond, you should be going to a 5-inch tall hinge. And if it's especially heavy, go with a heavyweight hinge regardless of the door width. So just because it's 4.5, it's a Swiss Army knife of the hinge world, doesn't mean it's the right one for you. So just be mindful of that. And hopefully that portion of the video made watching this worthwhile. There is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page in our site of Boston Architectural Hinge Company, and we currently have those parts there, along with a link to their website, which does not load. Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to load. Oh, it actually does load. They must have it there for old time's sake. Good for them. So the point is if you happen to bump into something, BAHCO, BAHCO, Boston Architectural Hinge Company, we will certainly be able to convert it to something that's available currently. Any questions on the BB0179 NRP 4.5 26D or any other BAHCO product that they made, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.